Snow fell softly on the small town of Bristol, Rhode Island, as Serafina Montgomery arranged the new exhibition at Harper Gallery. Her phone buzzed for the third time, her father's name flashing on the screen. She silenced it again. Whatever trouble Elijah had gotten himself into could wait until after the opening. The lighting on the Morrison piece needs adjustment, she told her assistant while checking her watch. The exhibit opened in less than 2 hours, and the photographer would arrive soon for the promotional shots. Her phone rang again. This time, an unknown number. Miss Montgomery? The voice was deep, authoritative. This is Lawrence Reeves, representing Mr. Jasper Blackwood. Your presence is required immediately at your residence. A car has been dispatched. I don't know who you are, but I'm working. I can't. It concerns your father's debt of $4 million. Mr. Blackwood is not a patient man. The line went dead. Serafina's hand trembled as she lowered the phone. Blackwood. The name alone caused a chill that had nothing to do with the February weather. Owner of the largest luxury hotel chain in the country, Jasper Blackwood had a reputation for ruthlessness that preceded him in every business circle. Megan, I have to go. Family emergency. The Blacktown car waited outside, its driver expressionless as he opened the door for her. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to her childhood Victorian home. Another sleek vehicle was already parked in the driveway. The front door was unlocked. Serafina entered to find her father sitting in the dark living room, a glass of whiskey clutched in his trembling hands. Across from him sat a woman in a tailored suit, her silver hair pulled into a severe bun. Miss Montgomery. The woman stood. Eleanor Price, Mr. Blackwood's personal assistant. I apologize for the abrupt summons, but time is of the essence. What's happening? Dad. Elijah couldn't meet her eyes. Sarah, honey, I did something terrible. Eleanor placed a document folder on the coffee table. Your father participated in a private poker game last night at the Blackwood Boston. He lost significantly, then continued to play on credit. When that credit was exhausted, he offered something else as collateral. What could you possibly have left to offer? Serafina turned to her father. You. The word fell like a stone. He offered you. Serafina laughed, the sound hollow in the quiet room. That's ridiculous. People aren't collateral. This isn't the Dark Ages. Mr. Blackwood doesn't want you as a possession, Miss Montgomery, Eleanor clarified. He wants a wife. A marriage contract, legally binding, for a minimum of 1 year. This is insane. I'm leaving. Serafina turned toward the door. Your father owes $4.3 million. Eleanor continued calmly. Should you decline, Mr. Blackwood will pursue all legal avenues to collect. Your Aunt Martha's assisted living facility, which your father partially owns, would be first. Then your cousin Theodore's scholarship fund. Mr. Blackwood is very thorough in his research. Serafina froze. You investigated my entire family? Standard procedure before allowing someone to play at Mr. Blackwood's level. Your father was overconfident. Elijah finally spoke. He'll destroy us all, Sarah. Not just me. Everyone. And if I agree? What happens after this year? Eleanor's expression softened slightly. Financial compensation, a divorce with generous terms, and all family debts forgiven. When would this happen? The wedding is arranged for Saturday. For days from now. Saturday? That's non-negotiable. Mr. Blackwood has a merger announcement on Monday and requires his new marital status to be established by then. Eleanor placed an elegant fountain pen atop the documents. Mr. Blackwood respects intelligence and directness, Miss Montgomery. You possess both. He believes you'll make a suitable partner for his public image. Serafina's mind raced through alternatives, finding none. May I read the contract first? Of course. Eleanor stood. You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow to sign. A car will collect the documents. She handed Serafina a business card. My personal number, should you have questions. After Eleanor left, Serafina confronted her father. How could you? I'm not property. I never thought he'd accept. Elijah sobbed. It was a joke, a desperate bluff. He wasn't supposed to say yes. Serafina spent hours reviewing the contract. The terms were clear. 1 year as Jasper Blackwood's legal wife, public appearances as required, discretion regarding the arrangement's nature. In return, complete debt forgiveness and $5 million upon dissolution. At dawn, she found her father passed out on the couch. Looking at the once strong man reduced to this shell, Serafina made her decision. She signed the contract. That evening, a black envelope arrived by courier. Inside, a prenuptial agreement, a gold fountain pen, and a simple note. I look forward to our partnership. JB. What Serafina didn't notice was the small symbol embossed on the envelope seal, an inverted phoenix rising from flames. 2 days before the wedding, Serafina finished packing the few personal belongings she would take to her new life. The rest would be stored in the attic of the Victorian house she had called home for 23 years. According to Eleanor Price, everything she needed would be provided at the Blackwood estate. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. No car was scheduled to collect her until tomorrow's final fitting for the wedding dress she hadn't chosen. Through the peephole, Serafina saw only a delivery worker walking back to a standard courier van. On the porch sat a cream-colored envelope with only her name written in elegant cursive. No return address, no postage, no company logo. Inside, a single sheet of expensive stationery contained a brief message. Beware the wolf in sheep's clothing. The Blackwood Empire was built on bones and secrets. Look for the inverted phoenix symbol. Not all prisons have visible bars. Serafina read it 3 times, her pulse quickening. She examined the envelope again, finding nothing to identify its sender. She thought of calling Eleanor, but hesitated. If this was a warning from someone inside Blackwood's organization, alerting his assistant might endanger her informant. With newfound determination, Serafina grabbed her coat. If she was signing her life away in 48 hours, she needed information. The Bristol Public Library was nearly empty on the cold Thursday afternoon. Serafina claimed a computer station and began searching. Jasper Blackwood Business History. Blackwood Hotels Founder. Blackwood Family Tragedy. Articles painted a consistent picture. Jasper Alexander Blackwood, 35, had transformed his family's modest hotel chain into an international luxury empire after inheriting the business at 17 following his parents' tragic deaths in a yacht accident. Forbes listed him among America's wealthiest bachelors, with estimated assets exceeding $11 billion. No scandals, no lawsuits that weren't immediately settled, nothing to explain the ominous warning. Serafina switched tactics, searching image archives instead. She found business photos, charity event appearances, and economic forum panels. In most, Jasper Blackwood appeared stern and formidable, tall with broad shoulders, sharp features, and penetrating eyes that seemed to evaluate everything with cold calculation. She was about to give up when she spotted something in an older photograph. Jasper at age 20, accepting an award, wearing a distinctive pin on his lapel. Serafina zoomed in, heart racing. There it was, a small emblem of a phoenix, but inverted, its wings pointing downward instead of up. The same symbol had been embossed on the seal of the envelope containing her marriage contract. A new search for inverted phoenix symbol yielded nothing meaningful. Private club? Secret society? Family crest? The trail went cold. On her way out, Serafina impulsively stopped at the reference desk, where Mrs. Whitman had worked since Serafina was a child. I need information about the Blackwood family, specifically any connections to Rhode Island from the 1990s. Mrs. Whitman's eyebrows rose. The hotel family? I heard rumors about your engagement. Quite the catch. News traveled fast in Bristol. Research for the wedding. Serafina lied smoothly. I'd like to incorporate family history elements. How thoughtful. Let me check the local archives. 30 minutes later, Mrs. Whitman returned with a dusty folder. The Blackwoods owned property in Newport during the 1990s, one of those Gilded Age mansions. The Cliffs, they called it. There was a society piece when they purchased it. The photocopy showed a younger Alexander and Alexandra Blackwood, Jasper's parents, standing before an imposing oceanfront mansion. In the background, partially visible, was a stained glass window featuring the same inverted phoenix. Mrs. Whitman, where did the Blackwoods come from originally? Before Rhode Island. Old Boston money, I believe. Though there were rumors about Alexander Blackwood's business practices when he first expanded the hotel chain. Nothing substantiated. She lowered her voice. My husband's cousin worked construction for them in the early days. Said they found something during the Boston Harbor excavation. The project was temporarily shut down, then mysteriously approved to continue overnight. What did they find? Don't know. But that cousin bought a house in Florida the next month and never spoke of it again. Back home, Serafina spread her findings across her bed. Not enough to piece together any coherent story, but sufficient to confirm the anonymous letter wasn't merely a prank. Her phone rang. Eleanor Price. Miss Montgomery, Mr. Blackwood's private jet will collect you tomorrow at 2 p.m. The final fitting will take place at the Manhattan residence, where you'll also stay until the ceremony. I'd like to meet Mr. Blackwood before the wedding, Serafina said firmly. A pause. That won't be possible. Mr. Blackwood is in Tokyo until Saturday morning. So I'm marrying a complete stranger? You'll have a lifetime to become acquainted, Miss Montgomery. After hanging up, Serafina made one final search on her laptop. Blackwood Yacht Accident 2007. The resulting news articles described the tragedy in vague terms: a sudden storm, a mechanical failure, the deaths of Alexander and Alexandra Blackwood. Their son, 17-year-old Jasper, had been at boarding school when it happened. The yacht's name caught her attention: Phoenix Rising. Serafina closed her laptop and packed it away. Whatever secrets lurked in Jasper Blackwood's past, she was now irrevocably bound to discover them. She took the anonymous letter and tucked it into a hidden compartment in her jewelry box, the only personal item she insisted on bringing to her new prison. This isn't the end, she whispered to herself. It's just the beginning. The Blackwood Hotel in Manhattan stretched 50 stories of gleaming glass and steel into the New York skyline. Serafina's reflection stared back at her from the limousine window as they approached the private entrance. Her face looked pale against the ivory silk of her wedding dress, a Vera Wang creation delivered that morning by an army of stylists. We've arrived, Ms. Montgomery. The driver's voice broke through her thoughts. Lawrence, the silver-haired butler she'd met yesterday during the dress fitting, opened her door. Welcome back, Mississippi. Everything is prepared upstairs. The private elevator required a keycard and ascended directly to the penthouse level. When the doors opened, Serafina stepped into a winter garden, an enormous glass-domed conservatory filled with white orchids, crystalline decorations, and delicate lights that transformed the evening skyline into a backdrop for the small gathering. Only 12 guests, Lawrence explained as he guided her to a small antechamber. Mr. Blackwood prefers privacy for personal matters. Has he arrived yet? Just now. Tokyo negotiations concluded successfully. Lawrence checked his watch. The ceremony begins in 20 minutes. Miss Price will collect you. Left alone, Serafina stared at her reflection in the full-length mirror. The dress was undeniably exquisite, sleek lines of silk falling to the floor, subtle crystal beading catching the light, a silhouette that transformed her into someone she barely recognized. The stylist had swept her auburn hair into an elegant updo, fastened with diamond pins worth more than her father's house. The door opened, and Eleanor Price entered. It's time. Walking the short aisle between chairs occupied by strangers in expensive suits felt surreal. Classical musicians played softly. Arrangements of white roses and crystal branches created an austere elegance. Serafina registered these details peripherally, her focus narrowing to the tall figure awaiting her at the improvised altar. Jasper Blackwood was nothing like the cold, wizened monster she had imagined. At 35, he stood imposingly tall with broad shoulders perfectly fitted in a bespoke tuxedo. His features were aristocratic, high cheekbones, a defined jaw dark with 5 o'clock shadow, and eyes of such intense blue they appeared almost unnaturally bright against his olive complexion. His black hair was impeccably styled, with a single silver strand at the temple. Those piercing eyes assessed her with analytical precision as she approached. No smile softened his features, yet something flickered across his expression. Surprise, perhaps. Miss Montgomery. His voice was deep, controlled, the slight rasp adding texture to the formal greeting. Mr. Blackwood. She was proud that her voice remained steady. The officiant, a judge, Serafina gathered, proceeded with efficiency. The ceremony lasted barely 15 minutes, with clinical exchanges of vows that promised everything and nothing simultaneously. When Jasper slid the platinum band onto her finger, his touch was surprisingly warm. The required kiss was a mere brush of lips, professionally executed, yet Serafina felt an unexpected jolt that left her momentarily disoriented. The small reception that followed was equally efficient. Serafina observed Jasper moving among his guests, all business associates, she learned, not a single friend or family member among them. He played his role perfectly, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back when introducing her, his posture attentive whenever she spoke, though they exchanged few actual words. "He's not what you expected." Eleanor appeared beside her, offering a champagne flute. Serafina accepted the drink. "I didn't know what to expect. 17 years as his right hand, and sometimes I still don't understand him," Eleanor confessed, watching her employer across the room. "But I respect him more than anyone I've ever known." She turned to Serafina. "A word of advice? Don't mistake his control for coldness. The walls exist for a reason." Before Serafina could question her further, Jasper appeared at her side. "The car is waiting, Mrs. Blackwood." His use of her new name sent another unexpected shock through her system. "I believe our guests will understand our early departure." The private elevator descended in silence. In the limousine, Jasper maintained a professional distance, focused on his phone until they cleared the city. Only when they reached the tree-lined drive of Greenwich, Connecticut, did he finally speak. "I apologize for the rushed circumstances. Business necessities dictated the timeline." "I understand. This is a business arrangement," Serafina replied, watching the elaborate gates of the Blackwood estate open before them. Jasper studied her with that same analytical gaze. "You're either remarkably composed or in shock. Perhaps both." The ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're not what I expected, Serafina Montgomery." "Blackwood," she corrected automatically. "Yes," he said softly. "Blackwood." The mansion emerged from the darkness, a sprawling neoclassical estate with soaring columns and dramatic lighting that highlighted its historical architecture. A staff line awaited their arrival, standing at attention as the car stopped at the entrance. Jasper assisted her from the vehicle, his hand steady beneath her elbow. "Welcome home, Mrs. Blackwood." Inside, the grand foyer rose 3 stories, dominated by a crystal chandelier and dual staircases. Jasper introduced only Lawrence from among the assembled staff. "Lawrence will see to anything you require. Your quarters have been prepared according to the preferences in your file." "My file?" "Standard procedure," he replied without elaboration. "Would you prefer to rest, or would you like a tour of the primary living areas?" "I think I'd like to change first," Serafina decided, suddenly aware of the weight of the wedding dress, both literal and metaphorical. "Of course." He gestured to Lawrence, who stepped forward. "Lawrence will show you to your suite. We'll dine at 8, if that's convenient." Jasper disappeared down a corridor, leaving Serafina to follow Lawrence up the east staircase. The elderly butler moved with surprising agility, leading her through a maze of hallways until stopping before carved mahogany doors. "Your suite, Mrs. Blackwood." The room beyond was a revelation, a vast space in shades of emerald and gold, with a sitting area, writing desk, and a canopied bed that could sleep 6. A fireplace crackled with fresh flames. "Your belongings have been unpacked, and the closet prepared with selections we hope meet your approval." Mr. Blackwood had everything chosen based on the preferences indicated in your "My file." "Yes." Serafina wandered to the window, where sheer curtains revealed moonlight on manicured gardens. "Thank you, Lawrence." "Dinner at 8 in the small dining room. I'll return to escort you." Alone in the opulent prison of her new life, Serafina finally allowed herself a moment of genuine emotion. Not tears, those wouldn't solve anything, but rather a deep breath of resolution. Whatever game Jasper Blackwood was playing, she would learn the rules and find a way to win. She opened the walnut armoire to find her wedding dress replacement and prepare for her first dinner with her stranger husband. Dinner was served in what Jasper called the small dining room, though it could easily seat 16 at its mahogany table. Tonight, only 2 places were set, at opposite ends of the polished expanse. Candles and a modest floral arrangement provided the only decoration. Serafina had chosen a simple emerald sheath dress from the extensive wardrobe provided. Comfort over intimidation seemed the wiser strategy for this first private encounter. When Lawrence escorted her in, Jasper was already seated, now dressed in tailored charcoal slacks and a cashmere sweater that softened his imposing presence. He stood as she entered. "The dress suits you." She took her seat as Lawrence pulled out her chair. "Thank you. Though I don't recall sharing my clothing preferences for this extensive file of yours. Credit cards leave detailed trails, as do social media accounts, even private ones." Jasper nodded to Lawrence, who began serving the first course, a delicate mushroom bisque. "Wine, please." Liquid courage seemed necessary. They ate in silence until the soup bowls were cleared. Jasper watched her with that same analytical gaze from the ceremony, as though cataloging her every movement. "You have questions," he finally said. "Ask them." Serafina set down her wine glass. "Why me? With your resources, you could have arranged a marriage with anyone, someone who would enter the arrangement willingly, without coercion. Coercion implies force. You made a choice, albeit under difficult circumstances. A choice between family ruin and marrying a stranger isn't much of a choice." Jasper conceded with a slight nod. "Fair point. To answer your question, I required someone intelligent and independent, with no public scandals, no compromising history. Someone who understands discretion and values family enough to protect them. Your background check was impressively clean. You investigated me before my father's poker game. I investigate everyone who enters my orbit, Mrs. Blackwood." The main course arrived, perfectly seared scallops with seasonal vegetables. Serafina took a moment to gather her thoughts before continuing. "So this marriage is purely for appearance? Business reasons? My board of directors has concerns about my public image. Apparently, being a divorced 35-year-old workaholic projects instability to potential investors." A flash of irritation crossed his features. "The Harrington merger required assurances of my personal stability. You were married before. Briefly. 5 years ago. It ended amicably." His tone discouraged further inquiry on that subject. Serafina tried another approach. "What exactly are your expectations for this arrangement?" "Professional cooperation." Jasper set down his cutlery. "Public appearances as a devoted couple. Attendance at business functions. Discretion regarding the true nature of our arrangement. Beyond that, your time is your own. And private expectations?" She met his gaze directly. "Marital expectations?" Something shifted in his expression, a momentary break in his perfect composure. "None that would compromise your comfort or autonomy." The dessert course came and went with lighter conversation about the estate's history and grounds. Serafina learned the Greenwich property dated back to 1892, purchased by Jasper's great-grandfather during the railroad boom. The original structure had burned in the 1920s and been rebuilt in its current form. When dinner concluded, Lawrence appeared to clear their plates. Jasper stood. "Would you join me for a drink in the library?" The library occupied the mansion's west wing. 2 stories of leather-bound volumes, rolling ladders, and comfortable seating arranged around a massive stone fireplace. Jasper poured amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. "Bourbon. My father's favorite." He handed her a glass, his fingers brushing hers briefly. Serafina accepted the drink and moved to examine the bookshelves. First editions mingled with contemporary volumes, many well-worn around the spines. "You actually read these. They're not just decorative. Books were better companions than people during my boarding school years." Jasper settled into a leather armchair, indicating she should take the one opposite. "I imagine you're exhausted from today's events. I won't keep you long. I appreciate your consideration." She sipped the bourbon, letting the warmth spread through her chest. "Though I suspect you brought me here to discuss something specific." A hint of approval flickered in his eyes. "Direct. Good." He set his glass down. "I mentioned expectations earlier. I'd like to clarify the terms of our arrangement more specifically." "I'm listening." "This marriage is necessary for reasons beyond your father's debt. I require a wife for public image purposes and certain legal complications. I propose 1 year of marriage and appearance. You'll live here, accompany me to social functions, and behave as my wife before the world. In exchange, I'll clear all your family's debts, ensure their continued well-being, and after 1 year, you'll be free with a substantial settlement. $5 million. Serafina nearly choked on her bourbon. "That's generous. It's fair compensation for your time and the disruption to your life. And during this year, what happens behind closed doors?" Jasper leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Nothing you don't explicitly desire. You'll have your own suite, your own schedule. We maintain the appearance of a normal marriage publicly, but privately, you retain complete autonomy. Why not hire an actress? Or find someone willing from the start?" Jasper studied her intently, as though weighing how much to reveal. "Because I need someone with unimpeachable integrity and intelligence. Someone who can't be easily compromised or bought afterward." He hesitated, vulnerability briefly crossing his features. And because I made a promise long ago. The cryptic statement hung between them. Before Serafina could question it, Jasper stood, effectively ending the conversation. It's been a long day. Lawrence will show you back to your suite if you'd like to retire. I can find my way. Serafina stood as well, maintaining the distance between them. Thank you for dinner. And the clarity. At her door, Serafina paused with her hand on the knob, struck by the surreal nature of her situation. 12 hours ago, she'd been Serafina Montgomery, preparing to sacrifice herself for her family. Now she was Serafina Blackwood, wife to one of America's wealthiest men, sleeping alone in a mansion filled with secrets. Inside her suite, she found the bed turned down, a silk nightgown laid out. Through French doors, she discovered a private balcony overlooking expansive gardens. In the distance, security lights illuminated the property's perimeter, a gentle reminder of the gilded cage she'd entered. Changing into the nightgown, Serafina pulled her laptop from her bag and opened a new document. At the top, she typed, "The Blackwood Mystery, questions to answer." She listed everything that didn't add up: the rushed marriage, the inverted phoenix symbol, the anonymous warning, his cryptic comment about a promise. Whatever game Jasper Blackwood was playing, she was now a central piece on the board. She needed to understand the rules before making her next move. As she drifted to sleep in the enormous canopied bed, Serafina's last thought was a troubling realization. Despite everything, she was intrigued by the enigma that was Jasper Blackwood. 3 weeks into her marriage of convenience, Serafina had established a routine. Mornings were spent in the estate's sunroom with coffee and her laptop, where she remotely managed her resignation from the gallery and researched the Blackwood family history. Afternoons often involved accompanying Jasper to business lunches or charity committee meetings where she played the role of devoted new wife. Evenings were quiet affairs with separate activities, occasionally intersecting for dinner when Jasper wasn't working late. They existed in parallel, occupying the same spaces without truly connecting. Jasper remained unfailingly polite but maintained his distance, revealing little beyond business matters. The few personal details Serafina had gathered came primarily from Lawrence or Eleanor during their frequent visits to the estate. "Mrs. Blackwood." Jasper's voice interrupted her thoughts one morning as she reviewed notes on his family's business acquisitions during the 1990s. "I need to speak with you." He rarely sought her out during working hours, making his appearance in the sunroom unusual. Of course. She closed her laptop. "Is something wrong?" "Not wrong, but there's a change of plans." He took the seat across from her, his expression unreadable. "We need to relocate temporarily to Newport. I must personally oversee the renovation of the Blackwood Historical Hotel. The seaside mansion would be more convenient." Serafina's pulse quickened. "Newport? You mean the Cliffs?" Surprise flickered across his features. "You know about the Cliffs? I researched your family properties." She kept her tone casual, not revealing her specific interest in the property with the inverted phoenix window. Jasper studied her with renewed interest. "Thorough. I appreciate that quality." He stood, adjusting his suit jacket. "We leave tomorrow morning. Lawrence will handle the packing arrangements." "How long will we stay there?" "At least 3 weeks. The Newport property is different from Greenwich. More isolated." He hesitated. "It was my mother's favorite home." The personal detail, offered voluntarily, caught Serafina off guard. She ventured carefully. "Did you spend much time there as a child?" Something darkened in his eyes. "Every summer until I was 17. The unspoken until my parents died hung between them. The helicopter leaves at 9 tomorrow. I've arranged for your father to receive treatment at Silver Pines Rehabilitation Center while we're away. They have an excellent success rate with gambling addiction." The thoughtful gesture was unexpected. "Thank you. That's very considerate." Jasper nodded once and departed, leaving Serafina with more questions than answers. The following day's helicopter journey took them along the Atlantic coastline. From the air, Serafina finally glimpsed the Cliffs, a sprawling stone mansion perched dramatically on the rocky Newport shoreline. Unlike the formal neoclassical design of the Greenwich estate, this property embraced a wilder, more romantic architectural style reminiscent of English coastal manners. Lawrence had arrived ahead with the staff to prepare the house. He greeted them as the helicopter landed on a private pad near the cliffside gardens. "Welcome to the Cliffs, Mrs. Blackwood." We've prepared the East Wing Master Suite for you both. Both? Serafina questioned, glancing at Jasper. The Newport property has a different layout, Jasper explained. Connected suites rather than separate ones. I'll ensure your privacy is maintained. The interior of the mansion revealed a warmer aesthetic than the Greenwich home. Natural materials, comfortable furnishings, and expansive windows that captured the dramatic ocean views. Art filled every space, much of it impressionist seascapes and botanical studies. The majority of the collection was my mother's, Jasper commented, noticing Serafina's interest in a particularly vibrant painting. Alexandra had an artist's eye, the little patience for developing her own technique. These are beautiful choices. Serafina moved closer to examine the signature on a small floral study. Were these all acquired, or did she commission pieces as well? Both. She supported several local artists. Jasper's expression softened slightly. The East Wing studio still contains her supplies. No one's used it since. May I see it sometime? Serafina asked gently. Jasper seemed to consider the request carefully. Perhaps. It's been sealed for many years. Their suite occupied the mansion's eastern promontory, with floor-to-ceiling windows facing the Atlantic. As promised, the arrangement included separate bedrooms connected by a shared sitting room. Serafina's bedroom featured a wraparound balcony and a color palette that echoed the sea below. That evening, Jasper surprised her by suggesting they dine on the terrace. The staff had arranged an intimate table overlooking the water, with lanterns protecting the space from the brisk ocean breeze. The Newport climate agrees with you, Jasper commented as they enjoyed fresh seafood and local wine. You seem more relaxed here. It's easier to breathe by the ocean. Serafina watched the moonlight shimmer across the water. Growing up in Bristol, I could always smell the salt air. Greenwich feels contained in comparison. Jasper nodded. Alexander said something similar. She claimed the Connecticut house was Alexander's domain, but Newport belonged to her. You rarely speak of your parents. There's little to say that hasn't been covered in the financial press. His tone remained neutral, but his fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around his wine glass. The yacht accident happened 17 years ago. I'm sorry for your loss. Serafina hesitated before adding. It must have been difficult, inheriting everything so young. I had excellent guidance. He set down his glass. Vincent Calloway stepped in as my mentor. He'd been my father's closest advisor for decades. I haven't met him yet. Vincent operates primarily from our London office now. Jasper's expression closed again. Eleanor has managed most domestic operations since I took over. The conversation shifted to safer topics: literature, travel, art. Serafina discovered that Jasper possessed a nearly photographic memory, easily recalling passages from books he'd read years earlier. His knowledge of international art was equally impressive, though he claimed to have inherited rather than developed that particular interest. For the first time since their arranged marriage began, they conversed like acquaintances beginning to know each other, rather than strangers bound by contract. Over the following days, Serafina established a new routine at the cliffs. Mornings began with walks along the private beach below the house. Afternoons were spent reading in the library or accompanying Jasper to the Blackwood Historical Hotel renovation site in downtown Newport. Evenings often found them sharing dinner on the terrace, their conversations gradually extending beyond pleasantries into more substantive exchanges. A week into their stay, Serafina decided to explore the mansion's rarely used sections while Jasper attended business meetings in Boston. The West Wing contained formal receiving rooms and guest suites. The central portion housed the common areas: library, dining room, conservatory. The East Wing beyond their suite remained largely unexplored. Following her instincts, Serafina ventured down the eastern corridor until she found a door left slightly ajar. Sunlight spilled from within, illuminating dust motes in the air. Pushing the door open, she discovered an artist's studio frozen in time. Easels remained positioned near large windows, canvases covered with protective cloths, paint tubes arranged meticulously on a wooden table. Drawn to the largest covered canvas, Serafina carefully lifted the cloth. Beneath was an unfinished portrait of a young woman with auburn hair remarkably similar to her own. The subject's face remained only partially rendered, but the resemblance was undeniable. I see you found the studio. Jasper's voice from the doorway startled her. Serafina turned, feeling inexplicably guilty. "I'm sorry. I was exploring and the door was open." "It's all right." He stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on the uncovered portrait. "You were bound to find it eventually." The woman in the painting was a friend of my mother's, Caroline Morgan. She died young. Before Serafina could question further, Jasper's phone rang. His expression transformed as he answered, professional composure instantly replacing the brief vulnerability. "I understand. Lock down the system and call Eleanor." He ended the call, turning to Serafina with renewed intensity. "We need to return to Manhattan immediately. There's been a security breach at company headquarters." As they hurried toward the helipad, Serafina noticed Jasper clutching something in his hand, a small silver object that caught the sunlight. When he pocketed it, she glimpsed the now familiar symbol of the inverted phoenix. The Grand Blackwood Charity Gala transformed the Manhattan Hotel's ballroom into a crystalline wonderland. 500 of New York's elite mingled beneath chandeliers dripping with diamonds on loan from Tiffany's. Waitstaff circulated with champagne flutes and delicate hors d'oeuvres prepared by a celebrity chef. At the center of it all stood Serafina, wearing a sapphire blue Dior gown and the Blackwood family jewels, a diamond and sapphire set that Eleanor had presented with reverent hands. The Blackwood sapphires haven't been worn since Alexandra's last public appearance, Eleanor had explained while fastening the necklace. Jasper insisted they were perfect for tonight. 3 days had passed since their abrupt departure from Newport. 3 days of Jasper locked in crisis meetings while Serafina prepared for her most significant public appearance as Mrs. Blackwood. The security breach at company headquarters remained unexplained to her, though she'd overheard enough to understand it involved compromised servers and potentially stolen information. "You outshine every woman here." Jasper appeared at her side, offering a champagne flute. In his tailored tuxedo, he cut an imposing figure that commanded attention from across the room. These jewels would make anyone look remarkable. Serafina accepted the champagne. "Though I feel like I'm wearing the down payment on a small country." The Blackwood sapphires are technically priceless, family heirlooms acquired during the 1920s from a displaced Russian aristocrat. His eyes lingered on the way the stones nestled against her collarbone. Alexandra wore them only for the most significant occasions. "Why tonight? What makes this event so important?" Jasper scanned the room, his expression revealing nothing. "Every major investor, board member, and corporate partner is here. After the recent irregularities, reassurance is necessary. And nothing says all is well, like your new wife wearing the family jewels." The corner of his mouth twitched. "Precisely." For the next hour, they moved through the crowd as a united front. Jasper introduced her to business associates, board members, and politicians. Serafina played her role perfectly, charming, intelligent, and obviously devoted to her husband. The weeks at Newport had given them enough personal knowledge to create convincing private jokes and shared glances that suggested genuine intimacy. "You're a natural," Jasper murmured as they briefly found themselves alone near the terrace doors. "The Harrington brothers are completely enchanted, and Senator Mitchell's wife has already invited us to their summer home. Years of gallery openings taught me to make small talk with wealthy patrons." Serafina straightened his already perfect bow tie in a gesture of casual intimacy for watching eyes. "Though I admit the stakes were lower when selling moderately priced watercolors." Something shifted in Jasper's expression, a softening around his eyes. "I've never properly thanked you for your commitment to this arrangement. Your adaptability has been remarkable." The unexpected warmth in his voice caught Serafina off guard. Before she could respond, Eleanor approached with purpose in her stride. "It's time for your speech, Mr. Blackwood." Jasper nodded. "We'll continue this conversation later." His hand brushed Serafina's bare shoulder, another small gesture for their audience, yet it left an unexpected warmth in its wake. Serafina watched him move toward the stage, commanding attention without effort. As the crowd shifted to face the podium, something caught her eye, a furtive movement in the upper mezzanine where the lighting technicians were stationed. A metallic glint reflected from the shadows. Training her eyes on the spot, Serafina saw it again. Unmistakably the barrel of a gun, aimed directly at the podium where Jasper now stood. Without conscious thought, Serafina pushed through the crowd. "Jasper!" she shouted, lunging toward the stage as he turned toward her voice. The gunshot cracked through the elegant space an instant later. Serafina collided with Jasper, knocking him sideways as the bullet splintered the wooden podium where he'd been standing. Security personnel swarmed the stage as screams and chaos erupted throughout the ballroom. "Get down," a security guard commanded, shielding them both as they were hustled toward a hidden service door. In the secure room below the hotel, a doctor examined the graze on Serafina's shoulder where the bullet had brushed past her skin. "Superficial," the doctor concluded. "It barely broke the skin. You're very lucky, Mrs. Blackwood." Jasper hadn't spoken since they'd been escorted to safety. He stood by the wall, watching the doctor clean Serafina's wound with an intensity that bordered on frightening. When the medical team departed and security personnel stepped outside to give them privacy, Jasper finally approached. His face was pale, his composure fractured. "Why did you do that?" he asked, voice barely controlled. "You could have been killed." Serafina winced as she adjusted the bandage on her shoulder. "I saw the gun. I reacted." "You saw?" Jasper ran a hand through his usually immaculate hair. "You deliberately put yourself between me and a bullet. Why would you do that for someone you barely know? Someone who effectively coerced you into marriage." The raw emotion in his question stripped away pretense. Serafina met his gaze directly. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just acted. I saw danger and moved." Jasper crossed the room and took the seat beside her. For the first time, he took her hands in his without an audience to perform for. "No one has ever." He stopped, struggling with words that didn't come easily. "In my world, Serafina, people are primarily concerned with what I can provide them. Protection, advancement, wealth. No one risks themselves for me. Only what I represent." The vulnerability in his admission cracked something open between them. Serafina squeezed his hands gently. "Perhaps you've surrounded yourself with the wrong people." Jasper's eyes searched hers. Whatever he found there caused him to straighten, his walls partially rebuilding. "You should rest. I've arranged for additional security at the penthouse." "Who would want to kill you?" Serafina asked. "Is this connected to the security breach?" "Most likely." Jasper stood. "I've made powerful enemies over the years. The renovation project in Newport has particularly aggressive opposition from certain quarters. That doesn't explain someone trying to assassinate you at a charity gala." The head of security interrupted before Jasper could respond. "Sir, we've swept the building. The shooter escaped, but we found this on the mezzanine." He handed Jasper a small card. Serafina glimpsed the now familiar inverted phoenix symbol before Jasper pocketed it. "What did it say?" she asked when they were alone again. Jasper's expression had returned to its usual controlled mask. "A threat. Nothing substantive. I think I deserve to know what's happening. If someone's targeting you, I'm clearly in the line of fire as well." For a moment, Jasper seemed to consider telling her the truth. Instead, he helped her stand. "Tomorrow," he promised. "Tonight, you need rest." "We both do." At the penthouse, security personnel conducted another sweep before leaving them in the care of 4 guards stationed throughout the apartment. Jasper insisted on personally escorting Serafina to her room. "I'll have Lawrence bring you something for the pain," he said as they paused outside her door. "Jasper." Serafina caught his arm as he turned to leave. "Tonight, when I saw that gun aimed at you, I realized something. Whatever arrangement brought us together, I don't want to see you hurt." The admission hung between them, more intimate than any staged affection they'd performed for an audience. Jasper's carefully maintained control slipped momentarily, revealing raw emotion beneath. "Nor I you," he said quietly. "Sleep well, Serafina." Later, drifting between wakefulness and sleep from the mild sedative Lawrence had brought, Serafina thought she felt a presence in her room. Opening her eyes slightly, she saw Jasper's silhouette in the doorway. He stood watching her for several moments before silently withdrawing. In the morning, she discovered a small box on her nightstand that hadn't been there before. Inside lay a delicate platinum pendant, a phoenix rising upward rather than inverted, its wings spread in flight rather than descent. The note simply read, "For courage, JB." The attack on Blackwood Enterprises headquarters began at precisely 2:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. Serafina had just arrived for her lunch appointment with Jasper when the fire alarms blared through the building. Smoke billowed from the executive floor, sending employees rushing toward emergency exits. "Mrs. Blackwood." Lawrence appeared beside her in the lobby, his usual composure fractured. "This way, quickly." "Where's Jasper?" she demanded, resisting his guiding hand. Mr. Blackwood is assisting with evacuation from the upper floors. He asked me to ensure your safety. Outside, chaos reigned as fire trucks arrived and confused employees gathered in designated safety zones. Serafina spotted Eleanor organizing department heads for headcounts, her efficiency undiminished by the emergency. It's a targeted attack, Eleanor informed her when Serafina approached. The fire started in the records archive. Digital servers were compromised simultaneously. Industrial espionage? Eleanor's expression tightened. Something more personal, I suspect. Jasper emerged from the building 20 minutes later, his suit jacket discarded and shirt sleeves rolled up. A smudge of soot darkened his jawline. His eyes searched the crowd until he located Serafina, visible relief crossing his features when he confirmed her safety. Everyone's accounted for, he announced to the assembled executives. The fire is contained to the 30th floor. Henderson, coordinate with IT about server recovery. Mitchell, contact our insurance representatives. Price, statement for the press. As the team dispersed to their assignments, Jasper pulled Serafina aside. You shouldn't be here. I had lunch plans with my husband, she countered. What happened? Deliberate sabotage. Same signature as the charity gala incident. His jaw tightened. This is escalating faster than anticipated. Let me help, Serafina offered. I managed crisis situations at the gallery. This isn't a stolen painting, Serafina. It's, sir. A security officer interrupted, holding a fireproof document box. We salvaged this from the records room, as instructed. It was in the secured cabinet. Jasper took the box, tension visibly leaving his shoulders. Thank you. That's excellent work. The box bore no external markings save for a small, embossed phoenix symbol. Inverted, wings pointing downward. What's in there? Serafina asked once they were alone again. Family documents. Jasper checked his watch. I need to coordinate the recovery effort. Lawrence will take you home. I'm staying, she insisted. I can help catalog what was damaged or stolen. Something resembling admiration flickered across Jasper's features. Stubborn, he murmured, almost to himself. Very well. Work with Henderson's team in the temporary command center. But if anything seems unusual, you come directly to me. The makeshift command center established in a nearby Blackwood property hummed with activity. Serafina was assigned to help sort through documents rescued from the fire. Most were routine contracts and financial statements, but occasionally she encountered older files from the company's archives. 3 hours into the task, she discovered a charred folder with the familiar phoenix symbol stamped in its corner. Inside, partially damaged photographs showed 2 young women on a beach. Though the edges were singed, the faces remained clear. One unmistakably resembled the unfinished portrait in Alexandra Blackwood's studio. Turning the photo over, Serafina found an inscription, The Guardians of the Secret. Hamptons, 1999. A.B. and C.M. The initials struck her with shocking clarity. A.B., Alexandra Blackwood. And C.M., could it possibly be Camille Montgomery, her mother? Further examination of the folder revealed correspondence between the women. Most pages were too damaged to read fully, but fragments jumped out. Must protect the children if anything happens. Alexander doesn't understand the implications. The phoenix must rise, not fall. A particular photograph caught her attention. Her mother, unmistakably pregnant, standing beside Alexandra Blackwood at what appeared to be the Newport mansion. Finding anything useful, Serafina started at the voice. Vincent Calloway, Jasper's mentor whom she'd heard about but never met, stood watching her with calculated interest. In his 60s, Vincent retained the sharp alertness of a much younger man. His British accent lent authority to his cultured tone. Just sorting through what was saved, Serafina responded, discreetly sliding the Phoenix folder under more generic documents. Vincent smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. You must be the new Mrs. Blackwood. Jasper has been remarkably secretive about you. We value our privacy. Indeed. His gaze dropped to the partially concealed folder. Historical documents should be handled by the legal department. Family matters are sensitive. Before she could respond, Vincent was called away by another executive. Serafina quickly photographed the remaining legible documents with her phone before relinquishing the folder to a records clerk. That evening, the penthouse buzzed with Jasper's crisis team until well past midnight. Serafina retreated to the library, examining the photos she'd managed to save. Each raised more questions than answers. Why was her mother with Alexandra Blackwood? What connection did they share? And most importantly, why had Jasper never mentioned knowing her family? When the penthouse finally emptied, Jasper found her in the library. Exhaustion lined his face, his customary perfect appearance disheveled from the day's events. "You should be resting," he said, loosening his tie as he poured himself a scotch. "My mother knew your mother." Serafina didn't waste time with preliminaries. Camille Montgomery and Alexandra Blackwood were friends, close friends, based on the photographs I found today. Jasper stilled, glass halfway to his lips. "You've been investigating. I've been discovering things you've kept from me." She stood, facing him directly. "Photos of my mother at your Newport home, correspondence between them, references to protecting the children. Why didn't you tell me they knew each other?" He set down his untouched drink. "It's complicated. Uncomplicated." Serafina's patience had reached its limit. "Someone tried to kill you, and now they've attacked your company. The phoenix symbol connects everything. Your family, my mother, these attacks. I deserve the truth, Jasper." The silence stretched between them, tension building until Jasper finally spoke. Camille Montgomery and Alexandra Blackwood were best friends from childhood. They grew up together in Rhode Island, remained close through college and marriage. He moved to the window, staring out at the city lights. They were together on the yacht the night it sank. Serafina processed this revelation. "But my mother died in a car accident when I was 5. "No." Jasper turned to face her. "Your mother survived the yacht accident. She was the only one besides me who wasn't aboard that night. She died 2 months later." "That's impossible. My father, Elijah Montgomery, was instructed to maintain that story for your protection." The foundation of Serafina's understanding of her own history cracked. Protection from what? Who would threaten a child? Before Jasper could answer, his phone rang. The caller ID showed Eleanor's name. "Price, it's late." "What's?" His expression shifted to alarm. "When? How many men?" A pause. "Lock down all access points. I'm on my way." He ended the call, immediately dialing security. "Full protocol at the penthouse. No one enters or leaves without my direct authorization." "What's happened?" Serafina demanded. "Eleanor's been taken." Jasper moved with controlled urgency, retrieving a small handgun from a hidden wall safe. "The kidnapper left instructions for me to come alone to the old Blackwood Pier in Staten Island. It's obviously a trap. I'm aware." He checked the weapon efficiently. "But Eleanor has been with me since I was 17. She's the closest thing to family I have left." "Then don't go alone." Serafina stepped closer. "Take security, call the police." The message was explicit. Any sign of authorities or security, and Eleanor dies. He tucked the gun into an ankle holster. "I won't risk her life." "Then I'm coming with you." "Absolutely not." "You need backup," she insisted. "Someone they won't expect." Jasper paused, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Why would you risk yourself again? After everything you've learned? The lies, the manipulation. Because despite everything, I believe you're trying to protect people." Serafina held his gaze. "And because I'm already involved, whether you like it or not." Something shifted between them, a recognition of deeper connection than their contractual arrangement. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Serafina Blackwood," Jasper said quietly, the confession clearly surprising even him. Before she could process his words, he closed the distance between them. His kiss was nothing like the polite public display at their wedding. This was genuine, urgent, a communication more honest than any words they'd exchanged. His hands cradled her face with unexpected gentleness, contrasting with the desperate intensity of his lips against hers. When they separated, both slightly breathless, reality crashed back. "We need a plan," Serafina said, forcing herself to focus. "One that doesn't end with either of us getting killed." Jasper's phone buzzed with an incoming message. He checked it, his expression hardening. The kidnapper just sent proof of life. Eleanor with today's newspaper. And a deadline. "We have 1 hour." "Then we'd better hurry," Serafina said, retrieving her coat. "But Jasper, when this is over, I want the complete truth. About everything. If we survive," he promised, "no more secrets." Fog clung to the abandoned Blackwood Pier like a shroud, obscuring the decrepit warehouse where Eleanor was being held. Jasper approached alone through the main entrance while Serafina circled to her observation point behind stacked shipping crates. Her heart hammered against the unfamiliar bulletproof vest concealed beneath her jacket. The warehouse doors groaned as Jasper entered. "I'm here," he called, voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Release Eleanor." A figure emerged from the shadows, guiding Eleanor forward with a gun pressed to her temple. Vincent Calloway's face appeared in a shaft of moonlight streaming through broken skylights. "Patience, young Blackwood." Vincent's British accent cut through the silence. "We have much to discuss before anyone leaves." From her hiding place, Serafina studied Eleanor's condition. Despite the duct tape across her mouth, the older woman's eyes remained alert, communicating a silent warning. "What do you want, Vincent?" Jasper asked, advancing cautiously. "Justice." Vincent positioned Eleanor between them. "Recognition of what your father destroyed. My father died 17 years ago, and still his sins echo." Vincent's laugh held no humor. "You don't even know why I've dedicated my life to dismantling yours, do you? Enlighten me." "Camille Montgomery." Vincent spoke the name with such reverence that Serafina felt a chill. "The woman I loved. The woman your father stole from me." Serafina's breath caught. Her mother? "We were engaged before Alexandra introduced her to Alexander during that summer in Newport," Vincent continued. "When she ultimately rejected him and returned to me, your father's obsession turned dangerous." Vincent forced Eleanor to her knees. "The yacht accident that killed your parents? I arranged it. One small device, strategically placed. It was meant for Alexander and Alexandra alone, their evening sail. I never intended for others to be aboard." "You murdered my parents," Jasper stated, his control slipping. "I executed justice. After the accident, when Camille discovered what I'd done, she threatened to expose me." Vincent's expression hardened. "The car accident was regrettable but necessary." "You killed my mother," Serafina whispered from her hiding place, pieces falling into place with devastating clarity. "Then I watched her daughter grow from afar," Vincent continued. "When I discovered you were also monitoring Serafina, fulfilling some promise to Alexandra, I realized I could destroy both remnants of the Blackwood legacy at once." "The poker game with Elijah Montgomery was your arrangement," Jasper realized. "You manipulated him to offer his daughter. A simple plan, though I never expected you to actually marry her." Vincent raised the gun to Eleanor's temple. "Now choose, your empire or this woman's life. The Blackwood legacy ends today." "Did you know Alexandra and Camille discovered evidence of my father's corporate crimes?" Jasper asked, inching closer. "They called it the Phoenix Protocol." Vincent's surprise was visible. "How could you possibly know that name?" "Alexandra's dying words to me. Find the Phoenix Protocol. Protect the child." Jasper took another step. "I've spent 17 years piecing it together." Eleanor made a muffled sound behind her gag, momentarily distracting Vincent. Jasper lunged forward, but Vincent fired. Jasper stumbled backward, blood blooming across his shoulder. Serafina erupted from her hiding place, tackling Vincent from behind. They crashed to the concrete floor, the gun skittering away as Vincent's head struck the ground with a sickening crack. "Jasper!" Serafina scrambled toward him, heart thundering. "Signal the team," he managed through gritted teeth. Within minutes, security personnel flooded the warehouse. Medics attended to Jasper while others secured Vincent and freed Eleanor. "You shouldn't have exposed yourself," Jasper chided weakly as paramedics prepared to transport him. "Don't lecture me about risks when you're bleeding," Serafina interrupted, clutching his uninjured hand. "Why didn't you just tell me the truth? About our mothers, about the danger?" "Vincent was getting closer to you. The marriage was the only way I could protect you without revealing the threat." His grip tightened. "I couldn't risk losing you." "You impossible man," she whispered, tears threatening. "You could have simply told me." A faint smile touched his lips. "And miss seeing you hate me so passionately? Never." 3 months later, the private beach at the Blackwood Cape Cod estate hosted an intimate gathering. Golden sunset light bathed the simple driftwood arch where Jasper waited, fully recovered from his wound, with Lawrence standing proudly beside him. When Serafina appeared, barefoot in the sand in a flowing white dress, Jasper's composed facade crumbled. Something raw and vulnerable transformed his features as she approached. "This time by choice, not obligation," she said, taking his hands. "This time with no secrets between us." He responded, voice rough with emotion. As they exchanged vows genuine enough to bring tears to Eleanor's eyes, Camille's antique ring, recovered from Vincent's possessions, gleamed on Serafina's finger. The phoenix pendant Jasper had given her nestled against her collarbone, its wings now pointing upward in flight rather than descent. During their first dance beneath string lights swaying in the ocean breeze, Jasper held her close. I never expected that forcing you to marry me would end with me falling hopelessly in love with you. Later, they walked along the moonlit shore, waves lapping at their feet. Jasper stopped suddenly, turning Serafina to face the water. Look, he whispered, pointing to the horizon where the cliffs stood illuminated against the night sky. For the first time in 17 years, lights blazed from every window of the Newport mansion, transforming the once haunted structure into a beacon of warmth. You reopened it, Serafina breathed. It's time to reclaim what was lost. Jasper's arms encircled her from behind. Alexandra and Camille's investigation notes were recovered from Vincent's safe. We can finally expose the truth, honor their legacy. Serafina leaned back against his chest, watching the distant lights reflect on the water. A rebirth from ashes. Like us, Jasper murmured against her hair. From contract to love, from lies to truth. The breeze carried their whispered promises across the water as Serafina turned in his arms. Their kiss held nothing of their initial coldness, instead burning with the hard-won passion of two souls who had found each other despite impossible odds. Above them, a shooting star streaked across the sky, a phoenix in flight, ascending rather than falling.